It was just another ordinary day at the Crestview Police Department. The rhythmic clatter of keyboards, the persistent ringing of phones, and the occasional static crackle from police radios blended into the familiar background noise of daily hustle. Officers were busy handling files, jotting down reports and managing minor cases. But suddenly, everything came to an abrupt halt when the large glass door swung open with a sharp, jarring sound. A tall man with an air of confidence stepped in, his heavy footsteps echoing against the cold, tiled floor. His suit was impeccably tailored, his tie perfectly straight, and his piercing gaze radiated authority. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, had walked into the police station. Completely unannounced and without a single Secret Service agent in sight, the room froze, leaving only the faint sound of astonished gasps hanging in the air. Lieutenant Noah Harding, a seasoned officer with over 20 years on the force, instinctively straightened up, his eyes reflecting a mix of skepticism and curiosity. He took a few steps forward, his voice steady but tinged with cautious respect. "Miss President, how can we assist you?" Trump scanned the room, his gaze distant, as if searching for something, or someone, beyond the unfamiliar faces before him. He replied in his signature firm tone, "I need to speak with your chief inspector, immediately." Noah hesitated for a brief moment, then gave a courteous nod. "This way, sir." Their footsteps echoed through the quiet corridor, leaving behind a trail of puzzled and intrigued stares. Chief Inspector Clara Donovan was poring over reports from the previous night when a knock interrupted her focus. "Chief, we have an unexpected visitor," Noah's voice called from outside the door. Before Clara could respond, the door swung open and Donald Trump stepped in. She sprang to her feet, maintaining a composed expression despite the surprise flickering in her eyes. "Mr. President, it's an honor to meet you. What brings you here?" Trump shook her hand, a firm, purposeful grip devoid of formal pleasantries. "I need your help with a personal matter." Clara raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "A personal matter, sir?" Trump reached into his suit pocket and pulled out an old, faded photograph, its corners creased with time. He placed it gently on the desk, sliding it toward Clara. She leaned in to examine the photo. A young boy standing next to a uniformed police officer, both wearing bright, hopeful smiles. Clara looked up, her eyes questioning. "Who is this, sir?" Trump's voice softened, tinged with nostalgia. "That boy is me, and the man beside me, he saved my life." Noah stood silently, his eyes widening in astonishment. Trump continued, his tone low but resolute. "I never had the chance to thank him properly. Now I need to find him, or his family." Clara picked up the photo, studying the proud smile of the officer. She asked quietly, "What's his name, sir?" Trump sighed deeply. "His name is Nathaniel Cooper. When I was 17, I made some foolish decisions. That night, he didn't just pull me back from trouble. He gave me a second chance at life. I've never forgotten that." Clara and Noah exchanged a glance, their surprise evident. This was not the reason they had imagined for the president's unexpected visit. "You want us to find him or his family?" Clara asked softly. Trump nodded firmly, his gaze unwavering. "I owe him everything." Leaning back in his chair, Trump's mind drifted to that fateful night in 1963. He had been a reckless teenager, desperate to prove himself. Friends dared him into a reckless, illegal act, and like many young men, he let his pride guide his choices. But before he could spiral too far, a police officer appeared. Officer Nathaniel Cooper. "Hey, kid," Cooper said, placing a firm but understanding hand on Trump's shoulder. "This isn't the path for you. You've got a future ahead of you. Don't throw it away over one stupid mistake." Trump listened. And that moment changed his life forever. Now, looking straight into Clara's eyes, Trump said, "I want to find him, or his family, and do the right thing." Clara slowly nodded, understanding the weight of this promise. Mr. President, I truly appreciate this story and understand what you're trying to do, but this happened a long time ago. Officer Cooper may no longer be alive. Trump's jaw tightened, his response immediate and unwavering. Then find his family. Someone out there deserves to hear this story. Someone should know that their father, their grandfather, once changed a man's life. Clara glanced at Noah, who gave a slight nod, his mind already racing with plans to dig through old records. "All right," Clara finally said. "We'll do our best, but you have to understand these things can take time." Trump replied without hesitation. "I have time. Just promise me you'll find them." Hours later, Noah sat in front of an old police database, scrolling through dusty digital archives. The name Nathaniel Cooper seemed buried in the annals of history, but Noah didn't give up. He searched arrest logs, patrol reports, and even newspaper articles from the 1960. It wasn't easy, but after hours of relentless searching, he found something. A personnel file. It was him. Nathaniel Cooper, badge number 5623, retired in 1983, passed away in 2015. Noah sighed, rubbing his temples. He didn't want to be the one to tell Trump that the man he was looking for was gone. But then a detail in the file caught his eye. Next of kin, Sarah Cooper. He had found her. Noah hurried back to Clara's office, where Trump was still waiting, his eyes fixed on the old photograph. "Mr. President," Noah began, his voice hesitant, "I have good news and bad news." Trump looked up, his sharp gaze locking onto Noah's. "Leave me the bad news first." Noah took a deep breath. Officer Nathaniel Cooper passed away 10 years ago. For the first time, Trump looked genuinely saddened. He swallowed hard, steadying himself. "And the good news?" Noah continued. "He has a daughter, Sarah Cooper. She still lives here in Crestview." Trump nodded, standing up abruptly. "Then find her. Right now." Clara blinked, hesitating. "Sir, we don't even know if she'll want..." Trump cut her off. "As always, she deserves to know what kind of man her father was." Trump, Noah, and a small security detail drove across the outskirts of Crestview, heading to where Sarah Cooper lived. The ride was mostly silent, with Noah occasionally sharing the few details he had found about her. Sarah was in her 40s, working an ordinary job, never in the public eye. She lived in a modest, single-story home, likely unaware that her father had left a profound mark on one of the most powerful men in the world. When the car stopped in front of her address, Trump took a deep breath. This was personal. No cameras, no politics, just a man fulfilling a promise. Trump knocked on the door. After a moment, it creaked open slightly. Sarah Cooper stood there, her expression filled with confusion. Her eyes widened as she recognized the man standing before her. "Mr. President?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. Trump gave a slight nod. "Are you Sarah Cooper?" Sarah nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the door. Yeah." Trump reached into his pocket, pulling out the old photograph and holding it up. "Your father saved my life when I was 17. I never had the chance to thank him." Sarah's breath hitched. Her gaze darted from the photograph to Trump's face. "My father, Officer Cooper?" She shook her head in disbelief. "That can't be. There must be some mistake." Trump's voice softened, carrying an unusual warmth. "There's no mistake. Your father changed my life. And I need to tell you what he did." Sarah's lips trembled. She pushed the door open wider. "Come in." The living room was simple yet cozy, with worn-out sofas and family photos lining the walls. Trump sat down, while Sarah couldn't take her eyes off the photo he held. "He was a good man," Sarah whispered. "The best. But no one ever remembered him like this." Trump nodded, his gaze distant and reflective. "He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. He stopped me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Sarah swallowed hard, her voice thick with emotion. "He gave everything to this city. But after he retired, our family struggled. When he passed away, no one came. Not a word, no honors. It was as if he never existed. Trump's jaw tightened. That won't be the case anymore. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. Why now? Trump met her gaze, his voice steady and heartfelt. Because some debts should never be forgotten. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then opened up. After my father retired, her voice cracked, the weight of years of hidden pain breaking through. We struggled just to survive. He never complained, but I knew he gave his whole heart to this city. When he died, no one remembered him. No pension, no support. I had to sell our family home just to get by. Trump sat in silence, his eyes darkened with somber reflection. He had always admired those who served their country quietly, but the thought of someone like Nathaniel Cooper, a nameless hero, being completely forgotten choked him. His hands clenched into fists. Sarah wiped away her tears. I don't need pity, Mr. President. I just want my father to be remembered for what he did. Trump leaned forward, his voice low but firm, as if each word was carved into the very air. This isn't pity, Sarah. This is a debt I owe. Your father didn't just save me from a mistake. He gave me a new life. I will make sure his name lives on where no one can ever forget. That night, the lights in Trump's room never went out. He picked up the phone, each call slicing through the silence like a blade. This wasn't politics. This was justice. First, he called the mayor of Crestview, then organizations supporting the families of fallen officers, but it still wasn't enough. Trump made one more call, this time to a trusted friend in real estate. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a knock at the door. When she opened it, she couldn't believe her eyes. Trump stood there, holding an envelope, a faint smile on his face, but a solemn look in his eyes. Sarah stared at him, curiosity mixed with apprehension. What's this? Trump handed her the envelope, his voice calm. A new home, a place worthy of your father's memory. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, revealing a deed to a fully paid house. Tears streamed down her face. Why are you doing this? Trump no longer smiled. He simply looked at her, his eyes filled with sincere depth. Because if the roles were reversed, your father would have done the same for me. A week later, the Crestview Police Department held a solemn ceremony to honor Officer Nathaniel Cooper. Unlike typical ceremonies, there were no long speeches, no political fanfare. Trump stood there before a newly unveiled bronze plaque, its golden letters shining brightly. Officer Nathaniel Cooper, 194020015. A silent hero, his heart and courage are the guiding light for generations to come. Sarah gently placed her hand on the plaque, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Dad, I finally see your name shining just like you lived." Trump stepped forward, his voice resonating through the crowd. Officer Cooper was more than a protector. He was a symbol of silent sacrifice. Heroes like him don't need the spotlight because their legacy lives on in the hearts they've touched. Thunderous applause erupted, but Trump only nodded quietly. This wasn't for him. It was for the man who once saved a reckless boy, allowing him to become president. After the ceremony, Trump and Sarah stood side by side in silence. Trump asked, "How do you feel?" Sarah took a deep breath. It's justice. Not just for my father, but for everyone like him. Trump nodded, his gaze distant. Heroes don't need to be remembered. They just need not to be forgotten. Before leaving Crestview, Trump established the Nathaniel Cooper Scholarship Fund, dedicated to the children of police officers. When Sarah heard the news, she broke into tears. This time, tears of pride. Her father will be smiling in heaven. He always believed everyone deserves a second chance. The first recipient of the scholarship was a young man who had nearly given up on his dream of becoming a police officer due to financial hardships. When he learned of Cooper's story, he said, I don't know who Officer Cooper was, but I want to be someone like him." Trump heard these words and simply smiled, knowing that the circle of kindness never truly ends. On the flight back to Washington, Trump stared out the window, softly whispering, "Thank you, Officer Cooper." He closed his eyes, feeling something he hadn't in a long time: peace. Not because of power, but because he had repaid a debt from the depths of his heart. The story of Nathaniel Cooper spread across America. People spoke of him not just as a police officer, but as a symbol of hope and quiet kindness. Months later, Sarah received a letter. "Dear Miss Cooper, I read the story about your father. He inspired me to decide to become a police officer. I want to be someone who can change a person's life, just like he did. Thank you for keeping his legacy alive." Sarah stared at the heartfelt words, then hugged the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face, but a smile still gracing her lips. Because she knew her father would never be forgotten, and his legacy would live on forever. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.